The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and help me welcome our former speaker, Bill O'Brien.
Carl, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
It's been a little while since I've come by here to see you.
That's right, but you're now in Nashua, so I get to see you a little bit more. And
That's the theory, but you know, there I am, sitting in my house in Nashua, and you still don't call me. It's hard to understand.
well, I have you here now, so tell us about your Writer Center group that you have
sure,
here.
sure. You know, that's something we started up. It was actually just the year after I finished up at the State House, so it's getting on near about 5 or 6 years ago. I think we had our 5th anniversary at some point this year. And what we found is when we'd left the State House, and I say we, it's Steve Stepanek before he became party chair, the both of us were talking and we're saying, you know, when people come to us and talk about issues that they want us to work on up the State House, we found that various groups among the center-right community not only weren't talking with each other, they didn't even know each other. You know, they didn't have the ability to coordinate. We thought this would be a problem that we could solve, that needs to be solved. Prior to that, when I had been at the State House, when I'd been speaker, a few times I've been invited down to Washington to speak at Grover Nordquist's Wednesday morning meetings. He has them once a week for his organization, Americans on Tax Reform. And I think, yeah, that's kind of what we need. You know, I'd go to these meetings, and they're invitational meetings, but you'd have the feeling, particularly at Grover, where there's maybe 150 people who show up, that this is like a conservative Woodstock. Everybody's here, and we can talk with each other, and we can meet each other, and we can figure out good practices and how do we assist each other. And I think we need this for New Hampshire. And so actually talking with Grover, I said, how do we do it? And he gave some suggestions and rules to set up, like no ad hominem attacks, confidentiality, as to what was said, unless you go to the person and say, can I repeat it? So there can be candor, and people aren't going to be sitting there saying, is somebody going to pick apart my remarks to cancel me? And so we started it up, and it's into its 6th year now, and it's going really well. Twice a month. It's Wednesday morning, Wednesday mornings, the second Wednesday, the fourth Wednesday at 8 o'clock. We kind of open the doors officially at 7:30. I get there a little bit early, as do a bunch of other people. And, you know, we kind of finish up around 9 o'clock. We try to finish as close to 9 as possible so people can come in and attend the meetings with us and then go on to work if they want to, or get up to the State House or wherever they're coming. And it's been successful.
Well, you've had good people coming in too.
Yeah. We have a keynote speaker, about 15 minutes, and we've had any number of U.S. senators, Governor Sununu, as well as governors of other states, a number of members of Congress, some thought leaders in the center-right community like Newt Gingrich and others such as Newt Gingrich. And you know, we have this cycle now. We have a candidacy forum where we're inviting in federal candidates to come and talk, and that's been really successful. I have to kind of admit, but it's something I've been admitting right along, these speakers are just the attraction to get folks there. And we know the meeting was successful, not when we get Newt Gingrich there, as much as it's fun to have Newt Gingrich or Ted Cruz or some of the heroes in my life come in. But what's the real hallmark of success is before and after the meeting, when we see people taking out their computers and they have their calendars and they're setting up meetings to talk with each other and everything. This is doing what we want it to do, which is being a focus of communication and promoting communication within the center-right community.
Well, I've been to a couple of those. I mean, but now you do it on Zoom as well as
we do. I started to say before the pandemic, we'd got it up to maybe 90 to 100 people would show up at the physical meeting. That was before we're doing video meetings. And that was pretty good. As our goal was, we're trying to beat Grover's meeting down in Washington. He has 50 states to draw on. We only have 49. and I think we might have beat him once.
Oh, really?
In one of our meetings.
Good.
But it's kind of a fun goal. When the pandemic came, we always continued the meetings. We always had a physical meeting, but we offered, once we realized, the hesitancy of people and the safety of it, a video component of it. And for a long while there, would have maybe, I don't know, 10 people would show up at the actual meeting, leaving us with a lot of bagels to eat. I'll tell you, a lot of coffee to drink, a lot of bagels to eat.
Oh yeah, you have free bagels.
Yeah,
and
free
coffee.
bagels. Well, yeah, it's a dieter's breakfast.
Yeah,
We
okay.
call it the breakfast meeting, but you better not expect to get anything other than bagels. And in about 90, sometimes more people than that showing up in video. It's hybrid now. We have the video component. We're trying to encourage people show up because again, the intent there wasn't to have people be able to roll out of bed at 7:45 and turn on their computer and sort of hear people because there's a lot of YouTube stuff around. There's a lot of information out there available over the internet. We want them to get the information that comes through attending a meeting and talking with each other. Finding out what does your group need, or you're doing that. I'd like to
Yeah.
tell you what our experience was.
Well, I
We tried
thought
to
that
do
was a big value in it.
Yeah.
When I used to go, when they only had the meetings, if
Yeah.
you went in
And,
person.
and so it's about split now.
Right.
We're increasing the numbers of attendees. I think we had our post-pandemic high last time where we had about 55 people show up. Again, another 45 or so online. So, it's a good communication device. We enjoy it thoroughly. It means at times it can be a lot of work,
Oh, I
but
imagine, yeah.
It's a lot of fun too.
Yeah. But that meeting in a group like that, even after your 9 o'clock closure, people stay there maybe another half an hour.
If
talking
not
about-
longer. If
Yeah.
not longer. I'm actually, because I have so many different things I'm doing, I'm one of the first people out of there probably after about a half hour. And there's still often 20 or 30 people there, to the point that Americans for Prosperity,
That's
the
where you-
New Hampshire chapter, lets us use their meeting room for it, and I kind of feel bad because I'm leaving all these folks there for them to entertain and host and everything, where I'm off to my next
That's
event.
right, yeah.
But they enjoy it too. It's a good thing. It's a really good
well,
thing.
they participate too. Yeah, we have
Oh, yeah.
somebody from there.
Oh yeah, no, it's a
is good.
communication with them. We have people who get up and say, "Here's my events coming up," or legislators say, "Here was what I'm sponsoring. If you can help us out, if you have any ideas about this subject matter, let us know. We can hear about votes that are coming up, and who to reach out to. Any number of subjects that come up when you want to be an activist for freedom and the Republican principles, then that's
What
a great
can you
place to
say
be.
about how people can participate? What's your process to do
Well,
that?
as I said, it's an invitational
Right.
event. Anyone in the center right community, if they contact us, usually it's somebody else recommending them. But if they want to contact me directly, I will tell you, Ray Buckley probably won't be able to meet the vetting process. But there are folks who over time see themselves moving, particularly in this day and age, into the center right
Yeah.
of the political spectrum. We want to let those people come in and hear what
So
we're doing.
you're the point of contact.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's a email invitational list and that we keep, and so if they want to get a hold of me, my email address is basically my name spelled out, William L. O'Brien. If you don't put the L in, then some guy who I don't know where he's located is getting my emails and won't tell me about it. But it's William L. O'Brien, Obrien, at protonmail.com.
Okay. Good.
And so, just get a hold of me.
Yeah.
And we want people to attend. There are requirements, as I said, confidentiality. We don't get in arguments with the speaker.
Right.
If you don't agree with what a speaker is saying, then sign up for the next meeting and tell us what you do agree with in that subject, or how you think mistakes are being made when in the way some people analyze it. But we don't want that kind of argument. And actually, in terms of substance, the only other control on what we talk about is we just don't want virtue signaling.
Yeah.
We all understand that Joe Biden might not be quite up to the job. We don't have to hear about it all the
Yeah,
time. We
yeah.
all know that. We want to know what we can do to
Right.
help another organization, what they can do to help us.
Or have the state do something better, because
Yeah,
you go
exactly.
right to the Sununu. He has people there. If he doesn't,
Yeah,
have-
often he has folks there. He's come and talked with himself. Usually the Senate president or someone from the state Senate will show up. Often Speaker Packard shows up, or he has someone come in. Majority Leader Osborne will come in, and so it's a great place to kind of see some of the folks that you read about in the newspaper and have an opportunity to say, Speaker Packard, have you thought about this? Or I like what you're doing. Or, I don't like the fact that you're not involved in this. And so it's a good place to come in and have those conversations that are, having been in the state legislature, are always of value to me, because you can get caught in that little state house bubble
yeah.
and not know what people are thinking.
well, let's talk about some of the other activities you're talking about. What do you want to bring up for our audience?
Well, I had a couple of editorials
Okay.
recently. I had one in the Union Leader, which I just sort of sat there and found myself writing because of just all the craziness that's going on out there. Just men who decide that they're going to call themselves women and invade the private activities of women, their sports and their locker rooms and all. Just this craziness. As I said in the editorial, that there is this invented reality out there of just absurd narratives that leave some of us wondering that while we were dodging COVID, that they were succumbing to mad cow disease. It's just absolute craziness. So, I wrote about it. You can look it up on the Union Leader. It was published, I don't know,
A couple of weeks ago.
last Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, last Wednesday. I also had another editorial that was published over this past Independence Day weekend, 4th of July weekend, that I was mentioning to you. It ended up at this point, so we're recording this on a Tuesday after Independence Day. And at this point, as of the morning, it had been picked up by newspapers with circulation of over 500,000 readers. And so, it's kind of got out there and reached. And it was basically a kind of an analysis in the 500, 600 words you get for an op-ed of the Dobbs decision, the one that overruled Roe versus Wade, and what the founding fathers would have thought about it. And the interesting thing is, at the Constitutional Convention, kind of the intellectual lights of that convention were Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. James Madison, to the point where he's called the father of the Constitution. He's the one that came up with the Virginia Compromise that talks about 3 branches of government. And no, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the 3 branches of government are not the House, the Senate, and the President. 3 branches of Congress, the executive, and the judiciary.
Right.
And he came up with this compromise. But within a few years after the ratification, and they were both, fairly young, active. They disagreed on what the Constitution meant, and in the disagreement fell on the same lines that we see now. There are those like Hamilton at the time who was looking for a national bank, looking for an activist central government who are saying, well, essentially, if it isn't prohibited by the Constitution, it's allowed.
Yeah.
And so they didn't look at it the way Madison said. You have to look at the words. These are the things that the federal government can do, and it can't do anything else.
Right.
And Hamilton even went so far as to adopt what I call the Humpty Dumpty rule for constitutional interpretation. If you remember, Humpty Dumpty in Alice in Wonderland told Alice that words have the meaning I give to them.
Yeah.
Nothing more, nothing less. And the words can't be the master of me. Well, Justice Blackmun in Roe versus Wade weren't going to allow the words of the Constitution to be his master. He basically said, I don't find anything about abortion. I don't find anything in there. But I'm just going to say, well, if it's not there, then it is. And then it exists, and it's a constitutional right. And, no matter what divide you are on the abortion issue, the Madison approach, which says this is a government of limited powers, limited to
Right.
those that were given in this document, is one that ensures freedom. It ensures that judges can't, based upon their own ideas of what policy should be, impose them on us. As Justice Alito said in the Dobbs case, there are some issues, and this is one of those issues, we have to leave to the people's representatives.
Right.
And Madison would have agreed, if you're going to do this, turn to those components of our political system that are sovereign, that have power in and of themselves. That's the states. New Hampshire has a government that is sovereign. It has police power. It can do what is necessary to carry out its function. All the federal Constitution says about New Hampshire and any other state in terms of the government they have is they have to be a republic. And as long as they're a republic, they can carry out what they think is necessary. But the federal government can only do what is outlined in the Constitution, can only choose those possibilities as to rights if they're articulated in the Constitution. Madison would agree with that. Obviously, Justice Alito, obviously the majority of the Supreme Court agree with that. And I think it's a protection.
Well, I agree with you, but I don't see how all these people are coming up with the objections that they say that it was unconstitutional. I don't see how they managed to convince themselves that that was part of the Constitution.
So shortly before we began recording, I was reading this article in the Wall Street Journal that was talking about the protests over in Paris, France, of the Dobbs decision and the overruling of Roe versus Wade and so forth. It was mindless because with the Dobbs decision, the worst that happened, and it will be based upon what states will do, but the worst that happened is the Supreme Court said the Mississippi law that says that you can have restrict abortions after 15 weeks will come into effect. In France, it's less than 15 weeks. It's 12 weeks, guys. So it becomes sort of a political thing.
Yeah.
It's basically, we're demonstrating because the U.S. is big and powerful, and we're not. And it's so cool to hate America. Let's just get out and do it.
That's always been a problem with France.
It's always been a problem. And I think, unfortunately, when you look at the things that are said on the left-hand side, the left side of our political spectrum, you come across the same mindlessness. It has nothing to do with reality. In point of fact, less important to our country is the pronouns that are being used by our military than the fact that it can say so powerful and effective that China won't invade Taiwan and Russia won't think I can go take out a NATO nation and America can't do anything about it. That's what is important, but not to those who are engaged in this invented reality. Much more important to them is whether or not we're using the right pronouns and whether or not a man who decides to put a dress on and some lipstick on should be congratulated as becoming a general.
Yeah.
And I don't care if the person's a general or not. It's just not that important. What is real important is the ability of the military to defend itself. What's real important is young women to have a right to excel in sports and not to have some big buck say, "Oh, I'm now a woman and I'm going to beat them in all the swimming meets."
Well, I see some agencies are doing something. Some of the sports groups.
Yeah, I guess the International Swimming Association. It has an acronym that's like FINA, something like that, which I don't pretend to know what the actual words of the acronym are. But I did read that it has decided that unless a male somehow avoids puberty, and I guess you do that by taking really powerful chemicals, but if they go through puberty, then they can't thereafter compete against women. I mean, the absurdity of this. Why are we talking about this?
I don't know why. It's obvious to me. I mean, I actually had an employment area that had to go through with it. And we had a person who wanted to change into being a woman. And I guess we tried to be as fair as possible and sort of had a review with some of the people that he was working with and found out that nobody really wanted to, let them in their bathroom, I guess you might say. So we gave him his own.
Yeah.
But that seemed to be all right. He didn't take it as offense on it, and everybody sort of went on with it.
So I'm a lawyer, and so I have to go through mandatory classes, and one of those is in ethics, and on an annual basis to maintain my lawyer's license. And I can remember being at one of these, and they were talking about, they brought in some person from California at the time, which seemed entirely appropriate based upon what she had to talk about. And she was saying, what do you do if you have a law firm and one of your assistants, a paralegal or something, who leaves on Friday as Robert and comes back on Monday as Roberta, and wants to wear dresses and everything? Well, most of us would have known what to do there at the time, which is to treat her, whatever, very gently. And their response, very gently, compassionately, explain to those around her that Robert/Roberta is under some distress, and let's kind of work with him to make his life comfortable. Their approach was, no, that's misogynist, that's racist, and and what you have to do is affirm it and go around and make sure everybody uses a female pronoun for this male, and so forth. And so I raised my hand, being someone who finds these things amusing, and said, well, what if you really do like Robert? You're very concerned. I said, I bet you most of us who have paralegals in our firm are. And you think that Robert's had a mental breakdown. Wouldn't this be sufficient evidence? And wouldn't you want to, maybe the most general thing is to go get some assistance, some mental health assistance for the person? Well, you would have thought that I was at the garden party and the proverbial skunk had been thrown by me into the middle of the floor. We lose common sense. It's not a major issue that this person wants to present himself as a woman. It's certainly, like Jordan Peterson says when they asked him, are you going to use female pronouns? He said, well, certainly if I know someone and they want to, I'm going to try to be courteous. Don't dictate to me that I have to. And I'm not going to be called out if I don't have to. I'm just going to be a polite person. Well, that's how we should deal with this.
Yeah, that's the way I think we'd handle it there. But before the end of here, you're also doing something that is going to be talked about pretty soon.
So the group that runs the center-right meetings was set up by Steve Stepan and myself. It's a advocacy organization, 501c4. It's called Pine Tree Public Policy Institute. And among its activities beyond running the center-right meeting is that we're sponsoring a constitutional amendment that would state, in order to vote in New Hampshire, you have to be a U.S. citizen, and you have to be a citizen in New Hampshire. And to be a citizen of New Hampshire, you have to have your primary residency here and your domicile here. So in past, it's just been domicile, which is instant presence, and we can't prove you're about to leave. And so, any number of campaign workers will come in, been hired to work in a campaign, they'll come in from out of state, vote because you can't really say they're going to go away. And it allows judges to say, you don't have to be a resident of New Hampshire in order to vote in New Hampshire elections. This constitutional amendment would require that. We were able to interest a number of legislators this time around, this past term that's just completing now, to introduce it. It was introduced into the New Hampshire House, into the New Hampshire Senate. Every Republican in both bodies voted for it, and every Democrat in both bodies voted against it. Every Democrat voted to allow all the folks who are listening here in New Hampshire to have their vote taken away by a non-citizen, whether it's a non-U.S. citizen or a non-citizen of New Hampshire. It passed, but not by the sufficient 60%, to get it on the ballot. That's what's necessary to pass a constitutional amendment in New Hampshire. You have to get it through the legislature with a supermajority of 60% or more. Then it has to go on the ballot and get 2/3 vote. And so we think that, first of all, people knowing this happened, knowing what kind of folks they're dealing with the Democrats, folks that would say that the situation that's coming up in New York City, where they're allowing non-citizens to vote in their elections, which in turn allows 50,000 citizens of mainland China who are in New York at any given point can vote in New York elections. They think that that's the way New Hampshire ought to be. And I bet you, whether you're a Republican, whether you're not registered in a party, or whether you're a Democrat, you don't want that. That's craziness. But that's what they're for. We think that with that knowledge, with all the other craziness and the inflation that's going on and so forth, that we're going to get a sufficient majority in both parties of the New Hampshire legislature this time, that when it's reintroduced, and we're assured that it will be reintroduced, we'll get that 60%, we'll get it on the ballot, we'll allow every person who's watching this program to decide for themselves, not have some crazy rep who can't have the courage to say that no, only U.S. citizens ought to vote in our election, that will have the ability to say it themselves.
Well, that's good. Let's have the 2010 all over again.
Well, it'd be great if we could get there. We did some great things. We avoided an income tax or a sales tax. They'd overspent. The Democrats had been for 2 terms in majority. They'd overspent to the point that we were almost $1 billion deficit, and we managed to get rid of that deficit without a broad-based tax. We've had a good budget this time. We've had great Republican legislators, and the Democrats just can't get off of being crazy.
Well, we've certainly been bringing more money into the state coffers.
Oh yeah, no, there's a huge surplus, which is an opportunity to further reduce taxes. Back when Calvin Coolidge was president, the worst problem he had to deal with is he kept on reducing taxes, and more revenue would come in because things would pick up. That's the New Hampshire problem now. That's a great problem to have.
Good. Well, let's go out and get them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Phil, for your time, and we'll have to do this again.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Thanks for having me back.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.